morning and welcome to our training today. So this is our speed masterclass training. We'll spend a little bit of 10 to 20 minutes time to talk a little bit about training versus competency. I'm going to dive deep into training needs and requirements for food safety management system today. So welcome. A little bit about myself. I'm a certified food scientist. I'm also a certified SQF consultant. I am specialized in food safety management SFCR program development. And also my interest specifically is on process designs, improvements, and ROI optimizations for food manufacturers. I also work towards coaching food businesses and food manufacturers towards compliance to GFSI's programs, and have worked with multiple food sectors as well. So hope to be able to help you a little bit in terms of understanding the training competency today. So our agenda today looks at the introductions to the concepts of training and competency. We'll look a little bit on training and competency requirements in terms of GFSI requirements. Today specifically, we'll look at SQF and ISO 22000. It's just a great comparisons in terms of the requirements and learning from each of the system. And we'll look at example of training requirements for food safety management system, as well as can you let loose competency that you have just earned. It's very, very important also to maintain that competency as an employers or as an employees, making sure you are say a top in terms of skills and ability as you perform your task. All right, and then we'll look at the open discussions. The open discussion for this reason is not going to be recorded. So the difference between training and competency. Training really means the process of learning the skills that you need to do a particular jobs or activities. So it's a lot of learning of that skills. What do you need to do the job or activities, right? Competency is different. Competency is the ability for you to do something successfully and efficiently, meaning you can do the task without really needing a lot of help if you're really, really competent. We'll look a little bit in terms of the example. So the example I pick here is hazard training. So a lot of us gone through hazard training. So within a hazard training that is accredited, it's a 16-hour classes. We get our hazard certificate, but it lasts for 5 years. That's our training. But a lot of time, the hazard training only get tested when we work on developing our hazard program. So, and then that's when the competency comes into place. Are you able to develop a working hazard? How many of you are able to develop a food safety plan? It's hard, eh? And getting a 16-hour class to develop a hazard plan, it sounds quite challenging. So let's look at a little bit of competency in terms of the levels, right? So if you look at a high competency level in terms of hazard program development, so the person will be able to do a complete analysis to the point where which control needs to be done and how it's being done. The other thing is if the person only have a medium competency, the person might miss a few small little control point or small little steps. Or the person has no competency or low competency, you might miss a critical control point. Let's dive in a little bit in terms of the GFSI programs. So today we'll be looking at two different GFSI programs in terms of SQF. SQF is very, very focused on training requirements. You look at the code 2.9 for the training requirements listing. And for ISO 22000, you look at 7.2. You do note the title on the ISO program is directly on competency. So the similarity between training SQF and ISO 22000 is you need to have competency and you need to make sure you determine the necessary competence of the person. Now look at a little bit of the highlighted items in yellow. I think this is a great item to kind of take into mind when we are developing our SQL program even. So it says, where applicable, take action to acquire necessary competence. So competence is acquired, and evaluate the effectiveness. So if that person is not competent, you can evaluate whether or not you need to train that person, mentor that person, or assign a person that is already competent to train the person, or hiring or contracting a competence person. Example of training list for food safety management system. So you look at the QA manager. So as a QA manager, you wear sometimes a different hat. So you might also be a QA practitioner. It's very important that you have the accredited 16 hours HACCP training, and also SQF training if you're working with SQF. Internal audit training to make sure that you are able to review your food safety program to make sure there are compliance or non-compliance, and to manage the program. And also look at the PCQI if you are in the US. Sanitation personnel, so you're looking at cleaning and sanitation. You also look at chemical handling and SDS training. This is very, very important so that the personnel is able to do the work and not create a food safety issues or risks, and also keeping themselves safe. Right. The next one, we go a little bit into production personnel training. So you definitely need a GMP training. You also need allergen management and control training, process control training in terms of if there's any process control, any monitoring activities, any corrective deviations activities that needs to be completed, it needs to be trained to the person. The foreign material controls to make sure that it's being reported and policy are being followed. And very important to make sure that if there's any deviations, it's informed to you so that you can take the appropriate actions to mitigate that deviation. So when do you need to evaluate training and competency? The first one is when you are hiring a staff. When you hire a staff, there is a job description that is where the basic skills and skill sets and competency you're looking for that person for that position. And if you do not get the right person, you have to go through that onboarding process to get the right skills or to get train the person to develop the right skills. But in all the cases, onboarding process is very, very important because that onboarding process gives the new hires a good understanding of how your food safety management system works, because it may work differently from one organization to another, making sure you're also taking that time to also train your personnel, new hires, and making sure they're competent before letting them exploring the plant themselves. When you're doing project management, this is a very, very interesting one because a lot of time we are given a project but not the resources. So we ended up needing to squeeze some resources from our own team that may or may not exist. So when that happens, so you would need to perform a training and competency on who is best suited to do the work and in project. And that can happen before, during, and after the project to make sure you're also reflecting on what you need for the future project. When you are relocating tasks, so for example, a person is sick on leaves and stuff, when you relocate tasks, also do consider the competency level of that person that you are assigning that task to. If that person is not competent, give the person a hand, obviously, to complete the task. Monitoring is monitoring and assisting as needed. We talk a little bit about covering employees for employee vacation and sickness. When there's a deviation, so when there's a deviation, it's almost automatic to put in our deviation report, train this person. But is it a training issue or is it a competency issue? And that is something that I would like to challenge you to look at through your deviation procedure, where you look at the root cause analysis of what actually caused the problem instead of relying on training to close the deviation. All right, so you have earned the skills, but can you lose competency? So I have a little short story to tell. I used to work with a production supervisor, and a lot of times, and all the times, all I heard about is my staff is not trainable. We've trained them so many times, we cannot get them to work, and they're the only person that we can work with. That is simply a lot of excuses, because a lot of times if you train that person and you train that person and you train that person, the person will be able to improve. Or if you determine that person is not suitable to do the job, then you might switch them to another task. However, very, very important that you perform the training correctly. A lot of times we think we train our staff correctly, but we didn't. And the right way to really train our staff is to train through showing what to do, supporting if there's any question, monitoring after the training to make sure they understand and able to perform that task, reinforce, and making sure the competency level is always there. So if you give a person that has 5 items versus 10 items on the plate, the result is going to be different. So making sure that you're also supporting that and making sure that the person is not losing that competency because you overwhelm them, basically. Make sure you also look at that perspective to make sure that your staff is able to handle the task that is being presented. Okay, competency. This is a very, very interesting topic to speak about. What can you do as a manager? So as a manager, we are responsible to make sure our staff is capable when we are assigning tasks. If the staff is not capable, that's when we put in the resources and make sure we're training them as we're assigning them through the task. So a good place to start is to ask your staff whether or not they have that skills, whether or not they need the support, or do they need to reallocate their own tasks. As a manager, you have the ability to assign and reassign tasks. So when you do that, please make sure you also consider that the ability to complete the task and the time to complete the task. It's very, very important so that that person that you have assigned the new task is also not losing their own competency of their own project. And go over that project, the assignments, intended results, so that your team understands what it needs to be done and the objective of it. I'll do regular check-in with our team so that we know the status of our projects and our tasks. However, one little note is that I like to have my team decide on the frequency of our meeting. So I'm always available when they need me. Okay? And very, very important. A lot of times we have a 2-person team and we're tasked 4-person job. And that is simply squeezing that competency level and making sure that if you need to take that resource, that if you need from a management. Okay. As an employee, it's very, very interesting because as employees, a lot of time we are too afraid to speak up, right? It's very, very important that you know when to ask for help, especially if you have tried the task or project and you are not getting anywhere. So asking for help in terms of skills, if you think your skill level are not there yet, getting that resources a little bit. Asking for prioritizations are very, very important because that is also part of your time management, making sure that you're also able to manage the new project or new task as it piles on your responsibility. And asking for timeline and objectives. There's nothing more better than the timeline of objectives that will really help guide you through the process. And I usually like to work it backwards so that I meet the intended result by breaking it into a smaller portions that I can achieve based on a weekly or monthly or bi-weekly basis. That really give you that time frame and time allocations that you are intending to do, say for 2 hours every week for that particular task. It helps you move, but it also helps you plan for your job assignment and responsibility. Okay, remember if you do not speak up or do not help your team, no one wins. So make sure that you are also speaking up and embracing that as we go. So what we do right now is we are providing trainings that are not just the normal training. We are providing training for you to learn and build your food safety program. And here are just a few training modules that we have. So the basics are we turn a program, a guided program, into a sessions where we do a little bit of teaching like this, but also we give you some templates to follow through or work with to follow through so that you can have a SOP ready at the end of the session. And because this is a group training session, we are going to make sure this at a minimal cost and you get the right support through our training program. So interesting, please check out our website. I'll have the website link available at the end of the presentations. Our Speed Masterclass is always free, and the next one it happens to be February 16th. So we'll talk a little bit about food safety system and what it means to implementing SQF or GFSI program. Right? So any questions? Thank you for attending our session. We'd like to wrap this up. This is our contact information. Please feel free to contact us. Check out our website for more content and resources. Thank you.